Your moral intuition has been taken away from you.
Our civilization isn't an emergency. We are descending down ever faster.
And your moral license to act has been denied to you.
We have to stop being willing to sacrifice the future of our people for our convenience.
We will not abandon you.
We're in the conflict though. You're either serving your enemy or you're serving your side. Right? Those are the choices. It's not whether or not to be in the conflict anymore. We're way past that. That's a luxury we no longer have.
Where good people have to hide, evil flourishes.
We will re-give you that moral authorization.
If we don't have a revolution, in other words, we don't get a reformation, we're going to have a civil war.
All right, and welcome back, everybody. Today I'm doing a bit of a bonus episode, if you will, of Field Notes. And today I have with me the man, the myth, the legend, Kurt Doolittle, who is the mischief maker whose work really sets up a lot of what I'm trying to do and doing with Modern Minuteman. And yeah, welcome to the show, Kurt.
Hello, Moritz. How are you doing? It's great. I'm excited to be here. Love what you're doing with the Modern Minuteman. But then again, we only expect awesome from awesome people.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I guess I'll start us off with a little bit of background for our audience and then ask you as well about your story. But the reason I'm doing the Modern Minuteman is manifold, but one of the most concrete ones is that it started off as a project with me last year having spoken at our third conference in our conference arc on the premise and ambition of our work. And in that talk, I explained to our audience what it really is that we're trying to do here at the Natural Law Institute, and then kind of the scene that we are cultivating more broadly. And that ambition is to build out the broadly understood knowledge base, as well as the relationships and skills and people that are required for revitalizing, reforming, and reconstituting our civilizations. And that is a task that is monumental in scope, which also means that for the vast majority of the time that we have been at this in the public eye, the way that people engage with that work is by following us on social media, engaging with us perhaps in conversation, watching videos and talks, perhaps doing a bit of their own intellectual work and trying to understand and integrate it with what they already know. And for the longest time, that was essentially the way that you would find us and engage with us. And of course, there were also times where there was a more direct, practical way to do something with us. We had in the summer of 2020, the Richmond event, at which we gathered up people to join and to some extent essentially protest against the COVID restrictions, but really more than that, to articulate a set of demands and declare a new independence from the way that our civilization is currently run. And I unfortunately wasn't part of that being in person there, but that is the kind of thing that we did. We did a number of other things, but now the game is to find the people who are already doing valuable things out in the world and to build relationships with them such that we can work together to accomplish this mission. So that's all a lot to set context, but really where it all started is with you. I think we could go into a variety of specific points, but one of the ones I always like to bring up to embarrass you is you at 12 years old in the church and essentially making a promise to your God that consisted of something to the effect of building him a church, and that you didn't realize back then that it would take the form not of a building but of an intellectual edifice that could house all of us. And I think you are well into that construction, and all of us are part of that are part of the institute. So I know, feel free to make fun
Well,
of
it's
it
like
or to
beware the
good.
promises we make to God, because He may make us fulfill them. You know.
Yes, and it may ask things of us we may not have been prepared to commit at the time of promising. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always say that if I, if I wish if God were just clearer in His directions. But anyway, it seems like this is, I mean, honestly, there haven't been that many thinkers who have made organizations in history. I mean, it's, Plato does, of course, right? The Marxists accidentally did, but we're doing. The libertarians tried, and I'm imitating them, and it's working. So, I mean, what are we? It certainly worked. I mean, you're a product of it working, obviously. Um, so it's worked, but it's like you said, it's a tremendous amount of, incredible amount of work. And if I had known what I was saying to myself, I would have chosen some other direction. It was a little less stressful. But uh, the real beginning, of course, that is the beginning. And of course, I was raised in a very moral context. So um, my mother's very Catholic, and my father's, from the Puritans, right? So, and so I have my family is very old and from what's called the lesser nobility, which means the people who actually have to do stuff. Um, and so uh, you're raised in that environment, but when you're a kid, you're raised in that environment. You don't actually know anything different, right? I mean, you don't know you don't know enough about the world to say, well, I'm being raised in this particular form. It's going to instill in me these particular values and these particular traditions. But anyway, so I have one of my ancestors is one of the Puritan reformers, and he wrote like 26 or 27 books, 25, 26, somewhere in there, books during the Protestant Reformation in England. Got chased around London all over the place by the king and everybody else for it. Um, so I guess it's a family tradition. I'm not that distantly related to Darwin, so I guess again, there's something going on there. I do know that in central England at the time in the 1600s, you had a group of people in the area who had lacked the nobility, and so they had essentially formed markets of what are essentially self-governance, and they did very well. So they were very suspicious of noble and monarchical influence, which they saw as parasitic. Um, and that's what led my ancestors to move to the USA, move to Boston, and become the first sheriff of the New Haven colony, and lots of other stuff. But anyway, the point I guess is you want me to get to is that somewhere in 1990, I was watching the news, and at this point, it was the point where the Democratic Party had started using the Marxist technique of talking points, which is they don't answer questions, they get on and they recite the parable, right? And so there's no discourse there, and that's where Fox News comes from. Bill O'Reilly and Fox News came out of that, and so you saw the bifurcation of news into the progressive versus conservative wings at that point, and it just amplified. So I'm watching this during the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, and I'm watching conservatives speak in what is traditional moral prose. The problem with moral prose is it only works if you share the same moral foundations, right? I mean, it doesn't work with anybody else, and especially when the conservative moral foundations are intertemporal, long term, and systematic and responsible, and the progressive morals are feminine, short term, and responsibility evading, or especially pushing it off onto someone else. So so at that time I said I'm going to set out to, I should have prefaced this, but I should set out to create a value neutral, universally commensurable, value neutral language of ethics and politics. In other words, I was just trying to give conservatives, or all parties, a means of speaking truthfully and honestly to one another. And so that's 1990 where I sort of set this in motion. But what's not clear is that I wrote during the 80s, I wrote the Liberty Papers, which was a pretty libertarian sort of propaganda rag.
We all
And
have the dark spots in our past.
yes, yes. And then I had been working in artificial intelligence, and it turned out that we had hit the AI winter. So I became more interested in making money and waiting until something there could happen. So it sort of replaced my original mission with essentially politics. And so by 2006, I made a draft which informed me of my level of ignorance. And by 2009, I had correctly understood the problem was law. And by 2012, I'd started the Institute. And so I just followed Aristotle and I'm just disciplined, right? I just worked through epistemology one step at a time. Um, Solving truth was, excuse me, reciprocity was easy because the libertarians had done all the work. Um, solving, well, they'd done all the preliminary work. Solving truth was quite difficult, but it's because I grew up in the computing era, not the logical or mathematical era. And so I was not artificially influenced by belief that mathematics was the primary rather than operations and computation. So that's probably where it happened. So I built one of the first legal AIs. And we were making so much money, we were buying 1 carat diamonds in bulk to store it in safe deposit boxes because we weren't smart enough to know what to do with the money. So uh, after that, during that process, I discovered that what was wrong with the law, because when you try to convert law to something computable, it exposes all the nonsense holes in it, right? So from then on, that's when I really got into the Hayekian, Popperian epistemic range, and eventually got involved in libertarians or whatever. So by 2009, like I said, I had sort of figured out the problem. So by 2014, I'd got truth solved, and from there on, it was the grammars and the the three. The real insight is actually the three means of coercion or influence and the ternary logic, and the grammars, and of course that led to the hard problem of religion, which took me like 4 years. So by 2018 or 19, I was pretty much there. The problem was when I tried to go to market with it, I tried it as philosophy and I found that people couldn't follow it. And so I got quite frustrated. And Brad came to me and he said, I need to help you because you're just, frustrated. And so we worked together. And due to his patience, mostly, um, we converted from talking about it as philosophy to talking about it as science. And it turned out that as science, it was ascertainable. People could understand it. So we wrote so it's sort of like I wrote the corpus as philosophy. Then I wrote it as science, and for our company now, I'm writing it as computation. And feel like it's like translating languages where there's no compatibility. I'm going to figure out how to say the same thing in a new language. So that's sort of my that's a like brief view of the journey, but really it's more intense than that because at some point, I mean, I was building companies to fund my research program. Really, I mean, that's what I did, and it's with the full knowledge of my management teams, right? I mean, they know what I'm doing. They're just like, I don't, Doolittle's just doing his thing, right? And so, but when was lucky enough to have the money to retire in my 40s, so that I could work full time on this, and I did. Fortunately, got very ill. Ended up in thinking I was going to be done, so that accelerated my devotion to it. And I ended up with you guys, and we sort of said, let's see if we can do this, and apparently we can. So we've done, we've gone to market. And we're much more influential than you'd think. It's not that people mention our names because we're not like personas, but you can see our ideas work their way through the internet and then into the media and then into the mouth of the president, and it's kind of funny to watch that happen. So our influence happens, and I've been told repeatedly, Kurt, you're way more influential than you guys think. Um, it's because we're not like nobody's going to have us talk on a freaking TV show, or I mean, and you happen to me all the time in Ukraine, um, but nobody here is going to. So, but anyway, so that's the sort of journey. That's the real thing to look at is that we've managed to put together a bunch of guys, you included, who are really smart and very good at this, and it's non-trivial. I mean, I don't know if you think how you think of it, because I haven't really uh,
I,
pinged
I
you on
can't
this that
really,
much.
I can't really much introspect to the point before this became just
Yes,
how I view the world. I mean, I can find top level beliefs that I might have had or ways of
yes,
relating
yes.
to the world, but it is very hard to reconstruct the actual way that I thought. So
Mhm.
yeah, it just
Yeah, I
has
can't
become
remember
second
either.
nature.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it becomes second nature, so you can't look back and say, "Well, I thought and felt this way," so it's hard to notice the transition. No, Brandon said it's a standard deviation IQ increase, in demonstrated IQ. It's not going to
Yes.
change your, and I think that's probably right. I mean,
I put
because
it, I think I put it in terms of years of accelerated development. I think right now, people, broadly speaking, perhaps arrive in adulthood in their early 30s,
hmm
which is an absolute horror to think about.
hmm
But if you do this work and if you start that, let's say, I mean, if you started at the earliest age and you kind of this was the basis upon which you built your education from the beginning, you would probably arrive at adulthood at the age of 12, 13, 14,
that's right.
something like
I
that.
agree
You would
with that.
actually you would actually arrive back at a state in history which we did have prior, which was uh, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds captaining entire ships because they were so competent that they could and responsible that they could be relied upon by people with real things at stake. And I think this is
Yeah.
at least something to aim for to recover.
hmm hmm Well,
So,
Alexander was what, 14 when he went out?
right.
We had plenty of ship captains of 12, age 12, right? And not like dozens, but we had them, right? Because, by the time you're 12-year-old boy, I mean, if you've been working not instead of playing, right? I mean, and learning a craft, you're pretty good at it by then because
Right.
even my grandmother, I mean, my grandmother used to knit socks, not socks, mittens for lumberjacks, big ones, the big ones that go up to here, when she was 4 years old, and sell them from the farm as they took the road to go to do to cut down trees. And I'm like, and girls used to. The reason girls were so effective in the publishing industry is because their fingers were small enough to sew bindings on books, right? So this infantilization is something that was predicted, something that was observed, but unfortunately, it's been something that's taken for granted. And I don't, and if you look at the evidence from education is that you don't need the kind of education we give in reading, writing, arithmetic, and etc. more than a few hours a day. But I would say that you need occupational and social training uh, far more than you need that in order to be a self-sufficient human, which is, I think, part of your deal as well as Luke's
Right.
deal. Right? Yes.
Right. I guess I have a bit of that education background, at least in terms of interest, although I never did kind of school or kids teaching in that regard. But uh, I think the ambition, at least, is to offer adults at the moment a path to a kind of completion of education, or
Yes.
at least to a sense, a real world sense that the way you're set up is sufficient to deal with the challenges that you encounter in your life. And I think a lot of people don't feel that they are mostly floating through reality, through life, moved by forces much greater than they can apprehend, in ways that they don't understand. And so they are predictably lashing out at themselves and those around them when they are the unwitting victims of those that would move them in those directions, whether those be natural
Yes.
forces or actual people. So
Yes.
this is something that I was also talking about in the call just now with Ian Burlingame, that in our
How is
modern
Ian, by the way? How
Ian
is
is
he?
good. Yeah, he's still dealing with his health issues, but he's fine. Yeah,
Anyway, I started to interrupt. Go ahead.
no worries. Yeah, so we were talking about that in this modern democratic state construct that we are in. It is very hard to assign responsibilities and make accountable for mistakes the people that are nominally in power, and so for that reason you don't really have a direct relationship with a person that you can go to get your conflicts and your grievances addressed and resolved, or at least people feel like they should be able to get that from their politicians or from their judges or
You
people in
can't.
those structures, but you can't. And so for that reason, it is not really easy to orient your life in a way that over time moves in the right direction by means other than the market and by means other than the attention economy. And so people are just simply following the incentives that they're subject to, rather than understanding fundamentally what are their interests, to account for them, to work with others to advance them, and then to do that even despite the incentives that are otherwise on offer from a, let's say, synthetic status hierarchy. So I don't know, how has this evolved during your lifetime? Like, do you remember it being kind of more in touch with reality, the way the status was assigned, or how do you view, yeah, how do you view people floating through, or rather directing themselves?
If you think of it as a radius of perception, when you live in a village and the news gets to you by mouth, like, months after stuff happens, you tend to be pretty focused on the range of your perception. And then print came around and readership came around, and then radio came around, and then television came around, and then 24-hour news came around, and then the internet came around, and what you can do instead of finding people with similar local interests but divergent personal wants, you end up associating with people with personal wants similar to yours and divergent political interests. And so the divisiveness is a normal process. They tried to manage it through the control of media, which was the left's objective. And it's why the I won't quote this perfectly, but I can't remember which cardinal said, you're basically putting a Marxist in every living room with a television. He didn't say those exact words, but that's what he meant. He was ruder than I am being. Um, and so, and it turns out that women in particular are very susceptible to this kind of thing, very susceptible to groupthink, and very susceptible to perception of injustice or being left behind. It's genetics, and you don't have a choice really. So during my lifetime, I've certainly noticed it. I mean, I remember my grandfather talking about it in the '60s, and of course, my father talked about it. My family's talked about it excessively, and even in business, I mean, the idea of a multinational that's going to have the kind of effect that multinationals have on our lives. I mean, they're essentially governments, states within a state in some cases, and they push international into it, what is valuable for them internationally into the domestic, and it's not good for us. So I've seen all of it happen. I don't, but I'm naturally a libertarian. I don't much care about that until it affects the the strategic um, uh, future group evolutionary strategies embedded in our civilization, and that's happened. We've had terrible collapses in that since 1900. We in the First World War ruined aristocracy, the virtue of aristocracy, and it somewhat ruined loyalty. Um, the Second World War gave us, mostly in its aftermath, ideological nonsense that is just perpetuated. The introduction, the post-war introduction of Marxists starting in the 1950s with the Frankfurt School and their mass accumulation of power within the, or influence rather, within the various academies and politics has been profoundly devastating. And unfortunately, while I don't like to talk about it, it's my job. Women are extremely susceptible to it because Marxism is essentially an advocation for the female group strategy. So the Marxist sequence, which is Marxism, class Marxism, race Marxism, cultural Marxism, sex Marxism, the whole hierarchy, which we call Marxism, feminism, postmodernism, libertarianism, neoconservatism. It's a whole goddamn thing. So, that's why I'm writing the book, the Crisis for Age. It's what now? Brad's laughing because we're going to hit 1,500 pages, and he doesn't like page counts that he feels he wouldn't read. So, and I'm like, yeah, you great. Then you figure out how to tell it in shorter form than we're telling it. So, do you want to say something? No, no.
Yeah, I guess I find it fascinating how a an original um, an original articulation of what your mission is over time kind of builds this entire tree of related efforts and kind of fruits that come from that, and uh, how your project then essentially became to uh, consistently and continuously prune what is not part of it away from it so that it can find full expression over time and have this kind of long-term impact. And so you didn't decide, oh, I want to write these many books and they're going to have this kind of character, and then you just stuck with that for the entirety of your life. But you decide this is my overall mission, or you recognize something fundamental that needed addressing, and then over time discovered the shape of the project as you put your effort forward and found how it met with reality or didn't. And so the way that the volumes of the work are now divided is an outgrowth of understanding the shape of the problem over time. And so the variety of drafts that you've put out or that you've built over the years were essentially the path necessary to arrive at the structural integrity of the current state of the work, right? I mean, this is something that when people think about how do I pursue a life mission, it's not that you can know it from the beginning and then you just execute it forever. You discover it as you go along and
right.
rid yourself of the misunderstandings and biases and blind spots that are inevitably going to be part of that.
Yeah, the way I describe it is the short version. I mean, you're absolutely correct. The short version is people presume the good and then try to solve for it. I don't. I just preserve. I say, if I eliminate all falsehood, what remains, right? And from what remains, what goods are possible, right? This is the. It's sort of like why our work is uh, compatible with law, is because it's basically about eliminating ignorance, error, bias, deceit, fraud, sedition, treason, whatever. It doesn't tell us what to do. It says you don't do these things, right?
Which is
Whereas
also why
most-
it's so alien to people, because they
Yes.
expect a philosophy, they expect a religion, they expect a political project,
That's
and
right.
then they are disappointed to find science.
Well, that was the big change, and we still have this problem, which you and I talk about quite frequently, is that somewhere in the 1800s, we sort of discovered that what led up to Popper's falsification, that justification doesn't work. It's why the philosophy program failed, right? The research into the philosophy failed, and why there haven't been any innovations in it, and they openly admit they failed at the philosophy of science, right? So, or the philosophy of truth. Um, so we just don't get into that stuff of presuming the true. We say we're continuously engaged in evolutionary computation, and we merely accumulate the falsehoods, leaving any non-false irreciprocal, right? Leaving non-false reciprocal, or at least not irreciprocal, and possible opportunities available for people to seize. Well, this distributes. Larger the population gets, the wealthier it gets. It distributes opportunity maximally to the population without limiting anything. Whereas in the past, every other system limits that evolutionary computation, which is what provides you with the social, economic, and intellectual and political means of maintaining that system as a means, as a market, which is means a system of evolutionary computation. So the only way to stay ahead is to not fall behind, and the only way to not fall behind is to stay ahead. And staying ahead requires continued perpetual evolution. And humans happen to be able to do that by thinking instead of like dying off in large numbers
Right.
and letting the genetics hopefully rescue them by trial and error.
And yet that happens too.
And I mean, we've changed a lot biologically in the past 10,000 years. I mean, you're Europeans, as we understand ourselves, we didn't even exist 10,000 years ago. Really, it's not really true. Didn't really exist 20,000 years ago. So it's pretty amazing thing that we've got going on here. I don't know. You've hit the important points already, which is that it's search for. You have to know what's true and false, what's false, basically, before you can select from the what is at least the promise of true and good, right? And so what I view as the academy doing is trying to fictionalize that they know what is a good before they know what's true. And so that's
Right.
why these ideologies keep failing. That's why, quite by accident, Europeans keep evolving faster. And it's just because we didn't try to make something that everybody agreed with. We made something that captured things that are prohibited, yet preserve agency. So the great question of our history is, did we overdo it when we went from enfranchisement of the demonstrated responsible to enfranchisement of the demonstrated irresponsible? It looks like that's actually the mistake. I mean,
Yes.
and it also took away the incentive and the means of discretion over who should have the franchise and not.
Right.
So that's what it
Right.
looks like to me. I mean,
Right.
I certainly
Right.
can't argue. I can't argue against it in any possible way.
I guess it shouldn't surprise us that the Academy is engaged in that kind of activity, given that the Academy is in general tasked with securing and justifying elite rule. I mean,
Well, it was, and the problem is it's not using elite; it's using credentialism instead of demonstrated competency.
right.
I mean, it used to be hard to get into a university, right? You had to be really exceptional, and
Right.
essentially you were getting permission from both the church and the state to have a future in the church and the state, right?
Right.
And,
Right.
but if you can make it in the military and you can make it in industry, I mean, you're not an idiot, right? And so up until Eisenhower, or after Eisenhower, I mean, the majority of people in the government were from the military, from industry, or from the American version of a noble family, which is somebody that is competent enough to preserve intergenerational wealth. Um, and so, now today it's credentialed, and I don't want to talk about its mixture, but the people in government are not good. I mean, that's not true. There are a lot of people in government, especially in the bureaucracy, that are not good. They're not good because they are credentialed and theoretical, rather than accomplished and practical. And the big difference between those two is our understanding of people's behavior. You can have a theoretical understanding of people's behavior, and you can have a really bad one if you're raised like most of the elites are around other elites. Now, you assume that's what people are like, but of course, that's the opposite of what people are like. Um, and so you get this very strange behaviors, and then you get the normal behaviors that emerge out of bureaucracies. And then to go to your point, you get the fact that in the absence of transparency and that makes accountability possible, in the absence of means of accountability, you're screwed. So that mirrors on the other thing you brought up, because you're bringing up all the smart points. I mean, I figured you would. That we used to be able to go to the manor to adjudicate a problem, right? You went to the local nobility, which was just the rich guys next door who owned all the land. He doesn't want any problems, right? He wants people to work and people to get along. Well, excuse me. So you go to the church if it's a moral problem. You go to the manor if it's a material problem, and of course you can always go to the state if it's a life or it's a serious problem, like a serious theft or life or death issue. And you could even appeal to Parliament or the king directly. I mean, that's why we were able to build the common law system, is because this access was available to us. But that only works under Martin's obsession with subsidiarity, which is that you've got to actually have access to these people, and they have to have the ability to alter the state of affairs to provide restitution for you. On the other hand, if they can do that, there's a baiting into habit of granting privilege and exception and buying people and corruption. So it's actually pretty hard to maintain this high trust system we've got. And the only thing that makes it possible is rule of law, transparency, and accountability. And I don't know about you, but over the past 2 years, what we found about transparency in the bureaucracies uh, terrifying, and accountability is worse. And even basic understanding of what the Constitution is about and what rule of law is about. I mean, I posted this other day, and I was like, if the women ever become the majority in the legal profession like they have in the academy, rule of law is gone, because it's very hard for women to not to follow rule of law in the first place, and once they have the majority self-reinforcing, it's gone. So I mean, do you really want that to happen? I don't know. I don't even want to say that out loud, right? I mean, because I don't want to even believe it's possible, right? But I mean, I have to go with the science, and the science is what it is. And I don't like a lot of what we've discovered. Have you noticed that we don't like a lot of truths are painful, at least painful for me. I always like to put women on a pedestal myself, but I mean, apparently not when it comes to judicial discretion whatsoever. So maybe even legislative discretion. But geez, I don't know. Pain in the neck. Anyway, so now that I've gone down a couple of rat holes, I was just trying to tie together that you had made two observations that were parallel and that were key to understanding the issue we're facing.
Right. Right. Yeah, I guess I've said this in prior interviews as well, but part of the reason why I call it modern Minuteman rather than the perhaps elite version that I could also have called it, which would be something like
Sure.
network statesman, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I'm thinking about it at the moment, is that there really isn't a very large pool to draw from for building those elites out of. And and also elites only really rise when the populace is able to hold them up and to back them up to some extent.
Yes.
I mean, right, like you don't rise purely on your own capacities. You have to get buy-in from other people. Generally speaking, an individual is not really capable of by force marshaling or bossing people around. You generally get buy-in from other forces that have the capacity to deny you the power to exercise power, right? And I think part of what has been going wrong in our civilizations for the past 100 years is that the populace no longer is capable of holding to account, but also backing up the people who are taking risks on behalf of the collective. We had essentially 2 generations of the most valiant men in all of our countries cut down by the brother wars. And as a consequence, you, of course, have a hard time marshaling anything resembling a reciprocal, accountable class of rulers that would also take risks, personal skin in the game risks on behalf of something of lasting value. And so I guess the point I want to get to is that there's a lot of false starts that I believe we individually and collectively make when we first diagnose what is wrong in the world and how we wish to address it. And it is really only after having gone down those routes and discovering that they don't work, that hopefully you don't double down further and instead actually correct. Although if we know anything about human behavior, it tends to double down until it hits the absolute bottom, and only then do you actually get behavior change. So perhaps the hope is that we have hit bottom. We are currently in a very low state of capacity and organization. And at the same time, perhaps this is exactly what we need in order to reconstitute and to actually discover again what are the solid things, what is the natural law way of understanding the world that gives you something solid to stand upon. And so once we have that, and once we are again exercising real ownership and essentially demonstrate interest in lifting people up who will take risks on our behalf and then back them up when they do, only then will we see a rise again of a leadership class that does take those risks and will defend us. And I think this is why I'm focusing on the Minuteman, the everyman, the citizen soldier first, because until the people who wish to have leaders act on their behalf are capable of discerning when they are doing that and when they are when they are diverting from that, and also are able to come to the aid, that we really get them doing this again. So yeah, that's how I view it.
The way I look at it is, you have to have what you're doing on a pretty substantive scale to get. And that's why I think I like what you're doing. Is you're eventually going to develop a corpus which can be taught and talked about, right? And that becomes a sort of what do you call it when you join a monastery or a night?
A monastic order, an order.
Yeah, but you sign a contract basically, right?
Right.
Bear an oath, right?
Right.
And so, I think that's what's necessary. Um, I would say, can we reconstruct it politically, top down? I know you and most of the guys work bottom up. I tend to think top down, um, and so I look at it as, well, can we reconstruct it? I think we can, but once you reconstruct an opportunity like that, it's like the worst people seek it. And so I think that if I went through and I said, how many military, senior military members are capable of this? Even there, it's small. Even there, it's small. I suspect you have to go down to the level of captains and majors, or simply ordinary ones, generals, to be able to find it, because of the politicization of the military since Clinton and Obama. So, I mean, I know what Hegseth is doing. Hegseth, it sounds like he's crazy, but he's not. He's making it possible for the old guard, not the old guard, the new guard of guys who want to restore the military's credibility and loyalty. He's trying to make it so that it's easier for them to force these guys out.
Right. By creating a standard of performance that every member of rank has to abide by, you don't get those people who put more of the energy into the scheming and the rule setting rather than the actual participation in what the objective is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Clinton's idea was to make the military as we call it social engineering program, which is it was the wrong thing. It is a social engineering problem. It's just not the kind of social you want that they wanted. We want the military to be the most epistemically intolerant population on Earth because they have the least room for foolishness. The judiciary can sometimes make compromises, but the military can't. The legislature can sometimes make compromises that the judiciary can't. But the military cannot do that, and so I'm very happy that this process is going on, but I'm not happy that it's happening now under conflict instead of happening under Bush one, in a supportive manner. So we've really had a bad. It's it's not been good since you know whenever it was not good when Clinton got elected, but it was tolerable because of the economy at the time. But once Obama got elected, it was just a freaking disaster. And I don't know how we're, that is going to cost us lives for certain, without question. So,
Right.
anyway,
Right. Yeah.
I feel
I
like
think
I'm dragging off your.
no,
I should be trying to help your Minuteman program here, and I feel like I'm going sideways on it.
this is great. I want to invite at this point the audience to go to the website of the Institute, naturallawinstitute.com, if you want to understand more what the body of our work consists of. I will warn, excuse me, I will warn you. It is a extensive body of work to get into. So this may not be the right thing for you to spend a lot of time on unless you are kind of interested in the fundamental intellectual foundations of our civilization and wish to participate at that level. We also have the .org site, same link, naturalawinstitute.org, where you can find what we do as a community, essentially, or how we support our community that you may be a part of in participating in this at your level. And then I would also like to invite you all to check out modernminuteman.net, which is the website for this project. This is where I explain what the program is that we're offering. I guess for the benefit of the audience, I'll just recap that again. And then I'm actually quite curious to hear your perspective of what it is that I'm doing and perhaps what this will evolve into. But yeah, so Modern Minuteman, last year, essentially, I realized this. We need to have some kind of way of taking the work of the Institute, making it approachable, at least offering the benefit of the core skills that engaging with this work teaches you, right? We have skills like operationalization, meaning to take your thoughts and ideas and utterances and to convert them from narrative and storytelling and essentially linguistic expression down into physical operations, such that you understand what you're actually talking about rather than using abstractions to hide your own ignorance either from yourself or those consuming your your drivel.
Or your unawareness that others have told you something that's untrue.
That's right. That's right. Other skills. Well, testimony essentially is the practice of speaking in a way that you can warrant. This to me was one of the biggest insights really of engaging with this work, is that truth isn't this abstract, absolute thing that you can reach in some perfect intellectual process, but it is a practice you can engage in. And the more you exercise your due diligence in ridding your speech of error, bias, deceit, and so on, and the more capable you are of assessing the effect of your speech and then warranting your speech and the impact it will have on the people receiving it, the more truthful you speak. And so This and other skills we taught last year at the first Minuteman program with Luke Weinhagen on cooperation, with Brandon Hayes, the president of the Institute, on decidability, accounting for your interests, and then with Noah on testimony, and with myself on statecraft, which to my mind, yes, it is the kind of elite sport of organizing society and in service of shared aims, but at the same time, I wanted to offer people an on-ramp to that kind of agency and that kind of thinking, which in your own life you can connect up to if you organize your own life in service of something greater than the pleasures of the moment, right?
It's actually rewarding.
Yes, yes.
It's rewarding.
Last year we did that program, and this year we're doing the follow-on program. I'm calling it a campaign, kind of call it also a crew campaign here and there, because the two core things I wanted to change were, one, to make it even more practical, and to that end I decided to do this in a flipped classroom model where the instructors I got this time around are providing you the information they want to teach you in advance of the live session, and then in the live session the focus is explicitly on applying the knowledge to your own circumstances and to perhaps interrogate the instructor with your questions. And then secondly, to not just do something as an individual, but to do something as a member of a crew. I think this is one of the other things where people struggle a lot. They don't have people around them in their personal lives or professional lives that they can do things with and cooperate with on a basis that is beyond the merely professional or the merely personal. And so this campaign is also organized around either you bringing people you already have relationships with and then strengthening them through this exercise, or to find people in the program and then build a crew out of that. And so that's what the program is. We have 30 days with 8 instructors, I believe. I'm talking later on with Homath to attempt to convince him to commit also and become an instructor and perhaps teach people about social warfare. And yeah, that's the program. And I guess at this point, Kurt, I'd like to hear from you. How do you see what I'm doing, and perhaps connect it also up to what my path has been in the past?
Say that again.
How do you see what I'm doing, and how do you connect that up to kind of the role I've played, or I will likely continue to play into the future, like my history and my ambition?
Well, as to say a private thing, I think you think most like me than anyone else on the team, which we discussed. So that's why I've always wanted to invest in you. I expected you to continue to be the the outward face of the institute in making relationships and associations, things like that. What I had hoped you would either write a book or do something like Modern Minuteman, and you didn't. I don't remember you talking to me about it. I just remember it happening by magic and me doing the equivalent of dancing with pom poms, at least mentally, because saw you do it. So I have a lot of hope and faith in you because you are able to reach people. And I have always found that my fundamental issue is um, I am so significantly different from the Vox Populi that it's very hard for me to translate, and that's not a problem for you.
Right.
So, of course, so the way that's my long way of saying I'm looking for your leadership to continue to grow and expand.
And by the way, the book
Because
is on its way. I am
yes,
in that process, yeah.
yeah, I'm aware of this, so I don't know if the audience is aware of this. So, and we sort of want everybody to produce some sort of intellectual demonstration of their knowledge, and we don't care really what it touches on, but we just like our guys to put stuff out there because it does end up showing the real competency of our people, and it leaves a lasting record of their and our intellectual development and material progress. So,
And our willingness to invest, right? I think this
yeah.
is the thing. This is, if you understand what is valuable fundamentally, and if you know what direction to go in the long term, it becomes much easier to do the things on a day-to-day basis that will over time accumulate into a lasting difference, versus just continuing to act hedonically and doing the things that are going to just essentially float away over time. So I think this is something that we all have experienced by engaging with this work. That once you have gotten to the bottom of it, everything becomes easier, everything becomes clear, and very little really gives you fundamental confusion at the end of the day. You can always discover either where somebody went wrong or where somebody is lying, and it's really very rarely much different than that, than those two options.
I think for if you're capable of the work, it provides mindfulness, right? Which is you get a sort of peace of mind because the truth is you understand everything. I mean, you may be surprised, but you can eventually understand it. And I think that that state of mind is something most people seek. But there is a group of people that, like us, that the truth may be painful, but that's okay, right? We still understand agency. There's still people in the world for whom the truth is intolerable, right? They need other solutions to mindfulness. But for us, the truth provides us mindfulness.
Right.
Anyway,
I guess.
I go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No,
Okay. I guess as a last thing, part of why I'm doing this as well is to build the relationships with the people who are already engaged in real world pursuits, right? Like the reason I chose the instructors that I chose for this program is because they have demonstrated a direct investment in doing something, and in doing it in the real world rather than merely online. I mean, Ian Burlingame is somebody who's been a Green Beret. We have Orwell, who is doing something in the real world with Return to the Land. We have Rogue, who
love that
lives in.
guy. Eric is a great guy.
Yes, we have.
If you get Jay Homack, he's a hot shit, really.
Yes, yes.
And he doesn't parade around as an intellectual, but he actually is
Right.
pretty much one. So
I admire his choice to deal with the suffering and frustration that his life path has exposed him to, and then decide to put it in service of the collective, even in the
Yes.
face of personal defeat. So,
yes.
all right, then I guess, yeah, lastly, I'll just invite everybody again, go to the website at modernminuteman.net, check it out. Please, please, please engage with us, ask us questions. My DMs are open, and I hope to see all of you at the campaign and help you either strengthen relationships you already have, perhaps understand better what your own role can be to play in this collective venture, joint venture of revitalizing our civilizations, and then to act on that and not just let it be something that is a passive intellectual entertainment, rather than an active personal investment in a livable and conquered future. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for coming on, Kurt.
Love you, brother.
All right.